Bandwidth for Changelog is provided by Fastly. Learn more at fastly.com. We move fast and fix things here at Changelog because of Rollbar. Check them out at rollbar.com. And we're hosted on Linode servers. Head to linode.com/changelog. This episode of Go Time is brought to you by AirBrake. AirBrake is full stack air monitoring for Go applications. Get real-time error alerts plus all the info you need to fix any error fast. And in this segment, I'm talking to Joe Godfrey, CEO of AirBrake, about why getting to the root cause of errors is so important.
Look, Adam, to me, root cause is everything. All software has bugs. We all know that. And when you find a bug or when you can't find a bug, the amount of time that typically gets spent trying to chase around and figure out how to reproduce the problem and what's the cause of the problem, even like what part of the code kicked it off or what sort of actions drive it. I mean, that's hours and hours of time wasted spent chasing your tail instead of actually fixing the problem, improving the customer experience, and getting back to building more features, which is really what your company is all about. So to me, being able to really understand like what is the root cause of this problem is the key factor to being able to solve that problem and get back to doing what's most important, which is building new features and improving your product and quite frankly, fixing the customer experience that's broken as long as that bug is out there.
All right, check out AirBrake at airbrake.io/GoTime. GoTime listeners get AirBrake for free for 30 days, plus you get 50% off your first 3 months. Try it free today. Once again, airbrake.io/GoTime.
I'm Russ Cox, and this is Go Time.
This is Go Time, a panel of Go experts and special guests every single week discussing the Go programming language, the community, and everything in between. We record live every Thursday at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. Tune in at gotime.fm.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Go Time. Today's episode is number 77. On the show today, we have myself, Eric St. Martin, and Carlicia Pinto.
Hi, everybody.
And Brian Kettleson.
Hello, hello.
And our special guest for today is one of the members of the Go team, Russ Cox. Welcome, Russ.
Hello, Gophers.
So I'm gonna guess.
May I ask the first question?
Sure.
Go.
I am dying because I forever have wanted to ask these questions to somebody, and Russ is super appropriate. So, Russ, why is it that the most technically brilliant someone is the tiniest the font on their website? Seriously.
I have no idea. I don't know. That was not a question I was expecting.
I don't think I've ever noticed that correlation. Like now I want to go crawl people's websites and actually make a comparison.
Jeez. Anyway.
Okay. So that fits perfectly with the random bit of news that I read this morning on Hacker News. There was a link to an essay, I guess is the best way to put it, about that Southwest crash that happened yesterday. And the person that wrote the essay was a very pompous sounding individual with a harvard.edu website. And it was the tiniest font ever. So interesting. I don't know if that's causation or correlation or which, but just saying.
So I'm going to back things up for just a minute. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that most people listening probably know who Russ is. But if not, and maybe a little background. Can you kind of let people know who you are and maybe how you got started on the Go team and kind of your history there?
Sure. So I'm Russ Cox. I'm currently the tech lead for the Go team. And I got involved with Go just about 10 years ago. At the time, I had worked with Rob Pike on Plan 9 when I was in college. And then I did an internship at Google in grad school. And when I was finishing up grad school, Rob told me about Go and basically said, hey, we're trying to take all the things that we really loved about developing software on Plan 9 and make them work for writing the software that, we want to write at Google. And, do you want to help with that? And I was like, yeah, of course. And that was how I got in. And, it's funny. I was thinking about this because I thought you might ask this. And it was about, 10 years ago. And I just can't believe how lucky, the ride has been since then. First of all, like as I'm finishing grad school, this job comes along that's like the perfect combination of all the things I'd been doing for the previous 10 years, right? It really was just sort of everything I had done found its way into Go somehow. And then I get to work with all these great people like Rob and Ken and Robert Griesemer and Ian Taylor. And, we sort of toil away for 2 years having a lot of fun. And then the like truly amazing thing happens that honestly, like none of us expected, which was that we did this open source release and people actually wanted to use Go. That was like mind blowing to us. When we did the release, Rob reminded me a while ago that I said to him a few days earlier before the release that, my hope was that maybe a few people would notice, and ideally whatever the next big language to come along would steal the concurrency and the interface ideas from Go. And that would be our tiny little contribution to making programming a little bit better. And, so obviously like that didn't happen, but I'm okay with how it turned out instead.
You gotta love the opportunity being presented to you by Rob Pike. I mean, who says no when Rob Pike says, "Come write a language with me"?
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. We were on a video call, actually. He was in Sydney at the time, and I was in Mountain View visiting Google. And so it was probably the middle of the night for him. But I remember, after I hung up and just like thinking about it some more and just like, I just couldn't believe my luck.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I think Brian and I don't have the level of contribution you guys do, but like the finding this language we love and then like, we want to share it with other people. And then kind of the explosion of we loved it, but we thought it was like a small niche maybe of people who loved the language the same way we did. And I don't think we ever imagined the language exploding in popularity so fast. I think you estimated like 1 million Go developers or something like that in a post.
Yeah, last summer we thought it was about 500,000, and at this point we think it's over 1 million. And we're trying to be conservative, right? We don't want to be just making numbers up, but those sort of conservative estimates, we think we're over 1 million now. And honestly, like I can't even comprehend that. It's just nuts.
It's awesome.
Yeah, I think in 2013, when Brian and I first started talking about a conference, we hoped we could get like 100 or 200 people to show up. So to think that there's 1 million people now is insane.
I mean, honestly, it was insane. I was thinking about the first GopherCon in 2014. I remember standing at the front of the room and just looking around, and I think that was 700 people, and I thought, wow, yeah. This is crazy. Like this cannot possibly keep going, and it clearly has.
Yeah, I think we were amazed and thought like that had to be every Go programmer in the world, at that time.
I think it was close. Rob, the best comment though was from Rob. He pulled me aside and he said, this is kind of like a debutante ball for my little baby. And I was just like, oh, like our little girl grew up. It's so cute.
So what are you working on these days on the Go team? Are you mostly kind of leadership, or is there a particular part of the Go programming language that you're super, super into right now? Outside of Vigo, which we will get to.
Mostly I do sort of leadership and helping us decide priorities and that sort of stuff. Especially since I had kids, I don't have as much time to program as I did before. So I spend a lot of time trying to help other people be as productive as they can. And then, the Vigo stuff is the main work that I've been doing. The last release, the main work I was doing was the build caching in the Go command, which, it sounds like it might be unrelated, but really it was all about getting set up for Vigo.
Build caching is awesome. Those build times just keep dropping. Test times keep dropping. It just makes me happy. So personally,
yeah, I'm thrilled about it.
I'm curious. This is a little bit of a roundabout question, but I'm curious about Plan 9. Really curious. I know you've been heavily in the Plan 9 space. Is it something you can still use? Do you find uses for Plan 9 today?
So Plan 9 was a lot of things. It really was its own world, and it predated Linux at some level, and in addition to the operating system, it had this whole way of thinking about resources and presenting them, and then it had all this simpler commands and UI, and it was derived from Research Unix, but it was not Unix, and so like there's a lot that was Plan 9 that, like, if you think about the experience of using Plan 9, there was the whole system. It wasn't just the operating system kernel. And so, people still run the full system today. And then in addition to that, when I was in grad school, I tried to use Plan 9 for a while, and eventually I realized that it just wasn't going to work out, mainly because everyone else in my group was not using Plan 9, and so it was very hard to coordinate with people. So I took all of the user space software and I ported it to Unix, and it now runs on pretty much all the Unixes, and that's called Plan 9 from user space, and it's on, or Plan 9 port, all jammed together, no spaces. And if you do Google search for Plan 9 port, you'll find the source code, and you can download and install it. And I still use essentially all the tools from Plan 9 and Rob's editor, Acme, and all of that. So yeah, I still use Plan 9 every day at some level, even though I'm on a Mac. And I really think that a lot of the spirit and the way that we approached structuring programming in Go owes a lot to Plan 9. Plan 9 had its own language at one point that had concurrency, and we didn't call them Go routines, but it had Go routines, and it had channels. And it was the place where we really experimented with all this stuff. And, we took what we learned and we moved on to other systems. And, I can run the editor on the Mac, and we can run all of the sort of concepts that we had over on Plan 9. We can do them in Go now, and it's great.
The thing I find most intriguing about Plan 9 is the file system. I don't understand all of it, but I've read several articles about people who wrote Plan 9 file systems, and it seems like you can expose resources across a file system in any way you want. So the article I read, they used the folder structure to show different types of sorting for the files that were on the file system. So you could browse them sorted one way by going into a different directory, and they're the same files, but they're presented differently based on how you access them. And I just love the idea of using that file system metaphor for completely different purposes than just storing things on a disk. I really want to play with the 9FS.
Yeah, it was a really fun system to use and explore. It was a research system. It was really meant for learning more about the way it could work. We used it as our day-to-day programming environment for many years, and the file systems, that was really the first interface. It was the only interface in the whole system, and you got to define what happened when the user called read and when the user called write, and so it's a little bit like /proc on Linux, where it really is kind of a free for all. What if you read and write files there, what happens? And It was the same way with all of our file servers. And it was up to the person who wrote the file server to figure out, something that made sense, that actually felt right to use. We never had things like, automatic sorting of files or things like that. It was usually about presenting resources. But, it was really easy to share files. The other really nice thing is that if everything is a file and presented as a file, and you know how to share files, then you know how to share everything. And so you could do things like import /proc from another machine and then run your debugger locally, but you were debugging a process on another machine. And that was not that uncommon. You just did it because you wanted to be working on your machine.
Wow. That sounds really powerful.
Yeah, it was. Too bad we didn't have a web browser. Honestly, that was why I gave up. That was actually the final straw, was that it occurred to me that it was going to be so much easier to port literally all of the software from Plan 9 to Unix than it was to port a web browser over to Plan 9. So, I took the easiest path.
I don't blame you. So I think the topic that's on everybody's mind right now is dependency management. But I think we should go there. Let's talk about Vigo and what led us to where we're at with Vigo, and what do you think about the future with dependency management?
Wow, that's a lot.
I know, it's a loaded question.
I guess
5 questions.
I guess maybe I should start with what led us here, right? And we released Go Get in about 8 years ago now, and if you go back and read the mail thread, the very first thing that someone asked was, well, what are you going to do about versions? And we said, I don't know, we'll find out. And, Go Get has actually been fairly useful, but of course, not having versions hinders various things. And so we started these discussions at GopherCon in 2016 and then into the fall. And that led to DEP being released. And the really important thing that DEP did is that it got package authors thinking explicitly about issuing releases that are tagged with versions, and users thinking about consuming tagged versions. And this was something that GoGet had not had, right? Everyone was just, I'll put my code out there and you pick a commit that looks good to you. Even though they're these random hex numbers, just pick one you like. And so this idea that I'm going to mark the ones that I think you should be using, and you probably shouldn't be using the other ones, is really an important social change for the community. And I think that that's the most important thing that's happened as far as like changing people's behaviors. But there's this problem that was really bugging me about a year ago that I couldn't articulate at first. And it was that one of the major goals of Go is to work well for these really large scale software developments. And so that means you have to have gradual changes. And by gradual, I mean that you've got some change that you want to make throughout your whole project. And it has to be okay to make that change one package or maybe even one file at a time, because you've just got too much source code to change it all in one commit. And so I gave a talk at Gotham Go a few years ago showing how important it was to make gradual changes for various code repair, and showing in particular how type aliases are essentially required for that kind of gradual change when you're moving a type from one package to another. But a similar problem happens when you need to update a large program from using V1 of a package to V2 of a package. You can't expect that the entire project is going to move from V1 to V2 in one commit. For one thing, the code is coming from different repositories. There's no such thing as one commit. And so, it has to, once your program gets big enough, it absolutely has to be the case that you can migrate the program a little at a time. One part of it is now on V2, now more of it is on V2, and eventually it's all converted, but it's this gradual thing, and you've got a working program the whole time. And so I was thinking about, how is this going to apply? And, DEP's design really forces you to decide. It says, for an entire build, I want to know which one version I'm going to use. And, this seemed like if one of Go's goals is to work for software at scale, this isn't going to actually work. And so then, I thought a lot about this, and this led me to this idea that, if we're going to take Semver, which is what people want and kind of expect, right? Like everyone is expecting Semver, then Semver actually gives us a way to talk about this, because they have this idea of a major version, and if the major version is the same and otherwise the version is newer, then it's supposed to be backwards compatible with this older one. But when the major version changes, then it's okay to make breaking changes. And so if you just put the major version in the import path, then now you've established that any particular import path should never change what it means. New things might get added, but things shouldn't be removed, things shouldn't break. And if you do that, and I call this now semantic import versioning, if you do that, then a lot of other things get a lot simpler. And a lot of the complexity that's involved in selecting what's going to, which version you're going to use, and all that sort of stuff, a lot of that complexity just melts away. And so this took me probably about 6 months to sort of realize. I'm mostly doing other things. I get pulled off for other projects at Google sometimes. But around November of last year, it occurred, that was sort of the aha moment I had when I said, wow, if we do this, it really seems like this might work really, really well. And then I spent a chunk of the next couple months prototyping this idea and, trying to convince myself that it was worth sharing with people. And then, of course, in mid-February, I posted, a whole lot of text about it. And that's where we are now.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, too. And I know that there's still some big supporters of DEP. And there's kind of, is there a lot more buy-in now from the kind of DEP supporters after kind of taking some time to take all this in? Or is there still kind of some points of contention with adoption? I know some people didn't like the idea of the minimal version selection.
Well, I haven't actually talked much with, I haven't been involved in sort of discussions about trying to convince people to use Vigo today. What we released was a prototype. We wanted people to experiment and tell us what worked and what didn't. If they wanted to try it in production, it worked with just a standard Go tool chain so that they weren't running, some experimental compiler or experimental runtime. So as long as the program built, you're probably okay running it. But we didn't actually want to tell people, go out and convert everything right now, because we weren't ready. There are things that are going to change. And so we haven't gotten to the point yet where we've really gone out and said, hey, we'd really like you to change. And if people say, no, I don't want to change, then have a discussion about, what's wrong or something like that. We're getting close to that. But at the moment, we've really just been taking the initial feedback, trying to incorporate it and understand, what we might need to modify a little bit, and trying to get something ready that we can get to that next step where we start to actually have conversations with people about, we'd like you to actually use this. Can we do that?
And I guess that's an important thing to note, that part of the plan for Vigo in the future is, as these things are decided and people try it out, and kind of the design is adjusted based on use cases that weren't initially thought of in the beginning. The end goal is for this to ultimately end up as part of the Go tool chain and not an additional tool.
Yeah, absolutely. This is just supposed to be the Go command. You shouldn't have to know it's there for the most part. I really want it to fade into the background. I want it to be the case that, you just don't think about it. It mostly works. When it does break, you understand what's wrong, and you just do your work instead of worrying about versions.
The only pushback that I've seen anywhere, I follow the Vigo channel on the Go for Slack, and really the only pushback that I see is the version number being as in part of the import path. I think that's something that grates on some people. But that's really the only complaint I've seen, only big complaint.
Yeah, that's definitely a sticking point. And it's not where I thought we were going to be. I mean, if you had asked me 9 months ago or 12 months ago, do you think version numbers belong in import paths? I would have said, no, absolutely not. And I also would have said, it kind of doesn't matter. It's kind of a matter of taste. And I think from a taste perspective, they probably shouldn't be there. And I wouldn't really have had much more to say other than that. And it wasn't until November that I realized that, if we do put them in the import paths, it actually has this very important system effect, that it simplifies things. And now you can have version 1 and version 2 in your same build, and all the tools just automatically keep those two things separate, instead of, understanding that actually there's 2 of a particular import path. And, every time you see one, you have to ask, well, which one is this? If you just use different names for them, all of those problems go away. And so the thing I would tell to myself from 12 months ago is, look, we've actually got a good reason for this. It's not that, we think it looks nice. In fact, I don't think it looks nice, but I think that we'll get used to it and it'll look normal in a few months, or maybe, half a year or a year.
Well, like GoPath, a lot of people resisted GoPath, but now a lot of us are so ardent about using the GoPath. Everything goes in the GoPath, not just Go code.
Well, we'll change that too. Maybe you'll get over that.
I doubt it.
I mean, even if you think about imports, right? Like the fact that it is actually a URL, like a lot of people who look at Go who aren't in the Go community or are just getting into it think it's the oddest thing ever. And once you've been around, you don't really think about it much. In fact, I kind of like it. Like, oh, I can go find the source code at this URL, right? But yeah, I think anything new or different just takes time to kind of get used to.
Yeah, and I remember that transition. I mean, we were, we had code without URLs. People just handed out code, and you said, oh, I have a package called foo, and just here, download this and put it in your GoPath under foo, and you just had to put it all together yourself. And that actually worked pretty well, but you couldn't automate any of that. And when we introduced URLs, absolutely, they looked ugly. But now we think, oh yeah, that's just the way Go code looks. It's fine.
And talking about changes, is GoGet going to go away?
I don't think GoGet will go away. It's going to change in the way it works. I'd really like to keep commands working as well as they can, as close as they can to what we have already. So, for example, I write lots of little throwaway commands, and there's like a 2-factor authentication thing at rsc.io/2fa, and I tell people, run GoGet rsc.io/2fa, and you have this command now. And so that's at some level, the UI or the UX of the Go command. And I want to preserve that. I want that to continue to install a command for you. But obviously, it's not going to work exactly the same way as it does today, because there's all this new stuff around modules and exactly what that means. But the end effect of something gets installed is supposed to stay. The write-up from February essentially overloads get to mean a few things. It means do the install and also download, which are the 2 meanings it has today, and then also update the what we call the go.mod file which has all the versions in it that you're using for your future builds. And so if you wanted to adjust the version of something you were using, you might say, go get this import path at v1.2 or something like that. And that part, it's not obvious that, that's a third thing that go get does. And it's not entirely obvious that we shouldn't move that out to a different command, but we're still trying to figure that out. But if you have in your fingers, go get something to go install a command, we absolutely want to keep that working.
For the record, my vote is to let go get continue to update that go mod file, because I love that a lot.
So do you have a particular timeline in mind for ultimately seeing this in the Go tool? I know that's kind of hard because it's hard to predict what will come up and everything, but what's your ideal timeline for this being kind of baked fully in?
Well, fully in, is obviously not going to happen in 1.11, which is wrapping up development half now, and then we'll do 3 months of testing and, bug fixing. I guess that Go 1.11 is meant to come out on August 1st, so it'll come out, August 15th or whatever. And then Go 1.12 would be February 1st. And so my guess would, we definitely want to have a Go release where the Go command is aware of modules and, can be used with module code and people get a sense of what it's like, but we're not committing to all the details staying the same forever. And we're sort of a kind of technology preview, but as part of a release so that people who only run releases can experiment with it. And we've done this before with some of the other changes. Like when we added vendoring, there was kind of a preview release and there was the real one. So my hope is that we can do the preview release and then maybe the one after that is the real release. But, like you were saying, things come up and the timing might shift. But, it looks to me like maybe Go 1.11 can be the preview release. And then the only question after that, assuming that happens, and that's still a question, but assuming that happens, then Go 1.12, maybe that's the real release, or maybe we have to, shuffle things around enough that we do another different technology preview release. But we'll see. My goal would be that we do the preview in 1.11, and then in 1.12, we have the full thing. But even once we have the full thing, we're not done. There's a lot of tooling and other follow-on stuff to really, build up some more ecosystem around it. And, that all is disconnected from the release. And so maybe that happens after 1.12. Maybe it happens concurrently with 1.12. It's sort of hard to say. And
2.0.
Maybe it's not. Yeah, 2.0.
I think that was a dismissal. It sounded like a dismissal.
I don't know when 2.0 is happening, so it's hard to tie things to that. If you want to shift gears just a little bit, I think that 2.0 will be kind of a non-event. I think that we'll probably end up, making changes a little bit at a time in the 1 series, and at some point we'll say, you know what, enough has happened. Let's call this one Go 2. And
so you're saying there will not be generics?
No, I didn't say that.
That was a big jump.
Because that would be a big event, I would say.
Well, but maybe generics are like 1.54 or something.
Gotcha.
This episode of Go Time is brought to you by ActiveState. ActiveState gives you a faster way to build and secure open source runtimes from your first line of code on through to production. Every second you spend building your Go distro or open source language distro is less time spent on doing the work you love. You got better things to do, you know it, I know it, and with ActiveState you can focus on your code and leave the open source to them. Your teams can standardize with Go builds from ActiveState for your specific use. You'll have less friction in the development cycle, and that means you can deliver apps faster. Try ActiveState and see why it was chosen by IBM, Microsoft, NASA, Siemens, PepsiCo, and more. Discover for yourself why millions of developers trust ActiveState to build their open source language distros. Check them out at activestate.com/GoTime. Once again, activestate.com/GoTime.
Yeah, so that I guess that's interesting. That at some point you might just label something 2.0. But does that mean you don't give yourself the opportunity to make breaking changes to get away from the Go 1 compatibility guarantees, or is just the hope that you're never really breaking any old Go code ever? Well, maybe not ever, but you try your best not to.
We definitely want to fix some things, but at the same time, we don't want to hurt people, right? Like, we have 1 million users. We don't want to, have 10% of them walk away or 50% of them walk away because we broke all their old code and they can't do anything anymore. I don't want to name names, but we all know, transitions that have been like that. And so, we're sensitive to both sides of that. And so one thing you could imagine doing that we've kind of talked about a little bit is, if you had some sort of signal that this is a Go 2 program, and let's leave to the side for a second exactly what that signal is, but somewhere you can extract a bit from the source code that says I'm trying to be Go 2 or I'm trying to be Go 2.1 or whatever. And then it just, it compiles differently, and different things are available. So, maybe there's some things we want to take out of the language that were mistakes, but we can't break everyone's code. And so they're going to stay in the compiler forever. But if you're compiling in Go 2 mode, you don't have that, but you do have, better error handling or something like that. And so, that's one way we could evolve. And, the active practices evolve, but all the old code keeps working. And, I don't know if that's exactly what's going to happen. Probably not. But something along those lines is what we've been thinking about. And it's very attractive because you don't break everything, but you do get to, improve.
You hinted that concept in the Vigo papers that you wrote, the idea of writing forward and backward compatible, I don't want to say landing, but the main library imports might be smart enough to understand what to do based on versioning, and then the Go tooling could change how it compiles based on that. And you used an example of like a go fix command that might fix that. Is that something that you expect to be in the compiler or in an external tool set?
I don't think it would be in the compiler. I think that would really be go fix. I think that, go fix right now does very little because we don't break things, so you don't have to fix your code.
Can I tell you how much I loved Go because of go fix in the beginning?
Oh my God.
When things were changing all the time, pre-1.
It was the best ever. We download release 56, run go fix, and ship it to production. Just done.
Hopefully you run your tests first.
We
actually talked about it one episode where I forget what release I started using Go in, but the only thing I remember ever having to manually fix in all of those breaking changes was when the rune was introduced, because it couldn't tell the difference between whether it was supposed to be a byte or a rune.
Right. Yeah, so, go fix, the real problem, right, is that we wrote these one-offs every time we made a change, and it wasn't something that scaled. And the cool thing about the little throwaway comment at the end of that first blog post about go fix is that you could really imagine go fix being a general thing to help you migrate from V1 to V2 of an API. And the way that it was presented there, it can't do everything, but the things that it could actually do completely flawlessly, because it would look at something and say, oh, V1 is now implemented as call this function from V2 and change the arguments a little bit in the following way. And, clearly if you're happy running that code, you should be happy essentially manually inlining that code, except it's automatically inlining the code, but doing it in the source code. So now the source code refers directly to V2 instead of V1. And, that should be fine, right? And then now go fix works for everyone. It's not just these one-offs that are about the language. So, I think that'd be really exciting. We haven't actually done that. And so maybe something doesn't work about that, but I think it'd be a lot of fun.
It's hard to put your finger on the best features of Go, but the ability for us to write tooling like that it's got to be top 3 in the way we can rewrite Go source code, the way we could change things on the fly. The AST parsing and all of that's it's such an amazing feature of Go.
And talking about change, Russ, I would like to ask you for what would you say would be things that you would like to have in the language that maybe is not something that necessarily there will be enough consensus or makes sense to add, but you personally would like to have, and also things that you would like to remove from the language?
Oh boy. Well, on the adding side, it's usually not so much a problem of consensus. I think that if we talk about things long enough, then typically there's specific details we might object to, and everything gets better as a result. Usually, the way it worked early on was that someone would have a crazy idea, and when you present the crazy idea to people, instead of turning it down immediately and just saying no, we're not going to do that, you say, okay, well, maybe we could change this detail, right? And if you're willing to essentially, be improvisational about it and accept what's been presented and then try to figure out how to make it better, we made a lot of progress that way. And so I'm not so worried about not reaching consensus. I'm more worried about just never figuring out the right thing to do. And so one example of that is immutability. I would love to have better support in the language for saying things like, when you call a write function on a file to write some bytes to a file, I would like the language to be able to guarantee for you, and you say in the program, the write function is allowed to write the bytes to the file. It is not allowed to modify the bytes, and it is not allowed to keep a reference to the bytes after the function returns, right? So that after the function returns, I know I can modify the bytes and no one's looking at them anymore. And this is kind of Rust's superpower, right? This is the thing that makes Rust so amazing. And I don't need the full superpower. I'd be happy with like baby superpowers, but I don't even see how to do that. And that's the one thing that I would absolutely love to figure out. But I just I've talked to a bunch of people about it, and it's one of these things that if there's any small case where you're not 100% right about it, you can't prove anything anymore. You really it has to be airtight. And it what Rust does is it gets it all right and it's completely airtight. And I would like to find a way to do that without quite so much notation, and I don't know if that's possible or not.
Is backwards compatibility a constraint for making that work?
It absolutely is, in the sense that like if we wanted to just be Rust, Go wouldn't compile anymore. But it's not so much about backwards compatibility, I don't think, as about the sorts of programs we want to be able to write. And so I think there's a lot of things where we'd say, well, we don't want to have to put annotations in this program, and or like we think that this should work, and it's hard to, if you don't annotate every last piece of the program, then a compiler has a hard time figuring out what's going on. And so it's not so much compatibility as conflicts with the rest of the design. I mean, Go is at a certain spot in the design space, and we consciously kind of put it there, and we don't want to move too far away from that. You end up with a different language.
That makes sense. And while you're still in the subject of making or not making changes to the language, I remember your talk from last year at GopherCon Denver, and I remember you requesting the community to submit reports. And this is something that we bring up on the show once in a while, reminding people to submit those reports. And I'm curious to know if you guys ended up getting anything useful out of that.
I think we've gotten a few useful ones. There haven't been that many that I've seen. I haven't looked in the last few months, but Robert and Ian have been sort of taking point on triaging all the stuff that's coming in. They've been going through all of the go-to issues on the issue tracker and trying to figure out, is this an obvious yes, obvious no? Is this something we need to put into a think about bucket? And then trying to organize them. And then, that's still an ongoing process. And so the experience reports are the next thing after the issues to start going through. And so I haven't looked at the current list in very much detail yet. But the really critical part about the experience reports is that they're kind of like tests. If someone says, I did the following, and this is a place where, better error handling would have really helped. And then we come up with a design for better error handling, and we can go back to that report and say, well, how would you have used that here? And then we can see, actually that wouldn't have helped there because there's this other detail that doesn't capture. Or, it would have been great. And so the really valuable thing is to get us thinking, and also to serve as test cases when we have, sort of more proposals, more concrete proposals to evaluate. And so we haven't gotten to the point where, we can use those for evaluation yet. But I think at that point, they'll be very helpful. And the other part that I wanted from the experience reports was to get a sense of, what are we missing? What are we not thinking about? And, it seems pretty clear that People want generics. People want package management. People want better error handling. And after that, it seems like we weren't really missing anything. It's not that there's nothing missing. It's just that there's nothing at that level of importance that we're missing. And so that's good to know. If you look at the survey that we just did, the end of year survey, I think the next thing in the what is Go missing question after those three is UI. But UI is probably an order of magnitude less popular than the first three. So if we get those first three out of the way, I think that'll be a really big deal for people. And then the rest is kind of lower order bits.
UI is an order of magnitude more complicated than all of those combined too.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's lots of different things. It's like not at all obvious that UI is something that the core library should be doing anyway. So I feel pretty good about not having, a plan for UI. I'm happy to let other people have that plan who actually understand UI.
So we got a good question in the Slack channel. Florin asks, in what role do you see for Go moving forward? In which space should Go evolve and which spaces should Go stay away from? Is this something that's influenced by Google or the community or a mixture of both?
It's hard to say. I mean, I don't really think of spaces that way. And so, we've staked out for Go that Go is supposed to be about programming in the large, where large is large scale programming, where you have lots of engineers or lots of code, and also, large scale deployments where you have, big distributed systems, things where you're talking to a lot of things at once and the concurrency really kicks in. And so I think those are still Go's strengths. And I think that Go is always going to be centered around those strengths. And to the extent that Go can stay centered around those and grow and make contributions in other areas, that's fantastic. I would be hesitant to stray too far away from those strengths. So if there's something that we want to pick up as far as a use case, or that someone proposed to pick up as a use case, and it meant essentially not taking advantage of either one of those, then that would give me some pause. So, for example, we talked to a team at one point who was working on 16-bit code on very, very tiny microcontrollers. And they wanted to know if Go would be a good fit. And we said, no, that's not something you'll want to do. And because, that's not what Go is targeting. Go is targeting server machines. And if you're targeting 16-bit systems, that's just a totally different ballpark.
Have you seen some of like MGO and things that actually run on Cortex M0s? I think it supports kind of like a subset of Go, but it looks very Go-like.
That's awesome. Yeah. I haven't seen it. I heard you talking about it on the episode last week or the week before, but I haven't had a chance to look at it. And I admit, I don't know what a Cortex M0 is. How beefy a processor is that?
It has like 16K of RAM, I believe.
Yeah, they're tiny. And just to pause for a minute, did we just confirm that you're a GoTime listener?
I do. I listen to podcasts a fair amount. I drive half an hour back and forth to work every day, and I listen to GoTime. I'm
putting that on LinkedIn.
But yeah, so it's got 4 kilobytes of RAM. It's a 48 megahertz processor, 16K of flash.
Okay, cool. But it sounds like it's a different Go implementation.
Yeah, for the most part, though, you've got your functions and imports and structs, and I think it supports Go routines and channels too. They just don't work exactly the same way. But it's interesting because if you like the syntax of Go, it's much more appealing than writing these things in C. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. I mean, if MGO had existed when we were talking to that team, maybe we would have suggested that.
But yeah, it's interesting though, and I'm curious to hear kind of the way you and some of the core people who worked on the language in the beginning feel when you see stuff like this, because it wasn't the end goal, right? But you're like, oh yeah, embedded probably isn't that great for Go, and then it's like, oh wait, people are using it to do embedded.
Well, it's not so much that embedded is not great for Go. It was really that the current Go implementation is not at all suited for embedded. And so if a team comes to us and says, we want you to figure out a way to make Go run on a 16-bit system, what they're really asking you to do is start over. And it sounds like, the MGO authors pretty much did start over, and that's fantastic. And they got something that's great. And so there is a question about sort of the language versus the implementations. And, I was sort of focusing more on where is the implementation going to go? A lot of, you can move into a lot of spaces without changing much about the language. And so I think that the main concern is the implementation. And I love having more implementations. I think MGO is awesome. I think Gopher.js is awesome. All of these are fantastic. It's just mind-blowing, but it's fantastic.
I guess that's a good point too, right? Is there's a difference between having full coverage of the language and having something that's very Go-like. And I guess the Go team's focus is on areas that you can implement the entirety of the language. So you can't do all of the language on 16-bit or small microcontrollers. It's only a subset. And, why focus your time there?
Yeah, it would just be a totally separate project as far as the implementation. And, we have limited time and we're trying to make the current implementation as good as we can. So it probably doesn't make sense to start a second one for us. But I'm thrilled that other people are doing it. I think it's just fantastic.
So what would you consider the specification for a Go implementation? One of the questions we had from Slack was, how do you feel about the LLVM versions of Go, the WebAssembly, all of the different versions of Go? Is there something that looks like a Go specification, or is that just the Go 1 test suite guarantee?
I mean, there is a Go language specification. So, first, let's get that working. As far as like compliance, yeah, if you can run all.bash, which is all of our tests basically, then sure, that sounds good. Let's do that. I want as many Go implementations as possible, right? That's how you know that it really works. And, people who sit near me are working on LLVM and doing a great job pushing that forward. And, Gopher.js and WASM and all these things, it's absolutely fantastic.
Now, we had another question, and we're starting to run low on time. What can you tell us about what the shape of the Go team looks like today? How many people at Google are working on Go? How many people, what are they doing? What's the Go team looking like today?
Well, there's tons of people at Google working on Go in the sense of using Go, writing libraries in Go, all that sort of stuff. The core Go team, which is the people that you'd actually see doing things on the mailing list and that sort of stuff, is about 30 people right now. And, we focus on really doing as little as possible as far as the scope, right? So, it's not, there's a ton of Java and C++ in the world and at Google. And it's not the case that, the collection of all the people writing Java or C++ in the world are called the Java team or the C++ team. And so we've been very consciously trying to encourage people like, look, if you're building X in Go, that's the X team. That's not the Go team. And so, we've been trying to focus on the language and the libraries and the core pieces that, we really need to be deeply involved in. And so that's what we mainly work on.
Can you give us a sense of the adoption of Go at Google, or is that proprietary?
I can give you a sense. It's used for a number of, fairly important things. There's tons of people checking in Go code every day. And, we're pretty happy about that.
That's a good sense.
Apparently it helps if you're not on mute. My dog was scratching, and I was like, I don't think anybody wants to listen to that. So I muted myself and then forgot to unmute. So, all right. So I think we've got maybe 10 or 15 minutes left of the show. Do you guys want to talk about any projects and news?
Holy cow. So many projects and news.
I know we just mentioned MGO and kind of talking about it last week. There is a follow-up to that post as well that we'll put in the show notes. So if you want to follow along, I think it was Mikhail was his name that posted it. I'd have to click the link. But yeah, so there's a follow-up, a second part to that series.
I'll put the link in Slack, and we'll get that in the show notes too. The thing that really got me excited this week was Elgo, which is at github.com/Yunabe, YUNABE/Elgo. And that's Jupyter notebooks, and it's 100% Go compatible. So unlike the Gopher Notes implementation, which is still awesome, but has a lot of limitations about what kind of Go code it will run. this new Algo implementation for Jupyter Notebooks does everything, including importing external code, gives you runtime code and introspection, code completion, the whole works. It's amazing. I was playing with it last night, and I can think of a million ways to use this for teaching Go specifically. So I'm super excited.
Did anybody see the announcement yesterday from Netflix for Titus?
Who's Netflix?
Just a small company that does some video streaming, I think.
That was for you, Scott, heckling us in channel. You get this. Yeah, see?
So I think that was just mentioned yesterday. I haven't got to play with it and really kind of take in the differences between some of the other container runtimes. But I'm pretty positive that their runtime or executor, I think is what they call it, is implemented in Go. But the control plane is in Java. This is where we need our sound effects board. Dun, dun, dun.
I skimmed the article and I seem to remember that it's like a divergence of Mesos, perhaps. I'm not positive about that, but it's based on something else, but it's diverged completely, and it seems to very much embrace the Amazon cloud environment, like it's kind of built in, which looked interesting.
All right. Do we have anything else, or do you guys want to move into Free Software Friday?
Let's hit Free Software Friday. There's some good stuff in there too.
All right. Who wants to go first?
You.
Me. All right. So I think I may or may not have mentioned this project before, but as we know, there's a lot of overlap in the containers and Go world. Kube Lego by JetStack on GitHub. And it is a controller that runs in your Kubernetes cluster. And if you add annotations to your ingress, essentially it will go out using Let's Encrypt and fetch certificates for all of the host names that you have configured in there and configure Nginx automagically for you, which is awesome because then we can do TLS everywhere and nobody has to do any actual work for it. Well, assuming you're running Kubernetes.
That's amazing.
Carlisi, you want to go next?
Yeah. I have a shout out to all of the people who added their names to the new speakers resources wiki page that Go is maintaining. And I'm pretty sure it was Russ Cox who started this page. And it's just fantastic to see a bunch of people making themselves available to help with talk proposals and speaking questions, because we do need more people speaking, and especially new people. So shout out to every single one of you on that page.
Yeah, that's
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Russ.
I was saying I'll second that. That I'm absolutely thrilled that so many people are interested in helping, and absolutely, we want to see as many new speakers and new perspectives as we can, and I really want to encourage everyone to try to make people feel welcome, encourage people to speak, and conference organizers to do everything you can to get new people to come, because we have 1 million people, but that's not enough. We need all sorts of people, and let's make that happen.
Yay.
And I'm curious how we can get more people to take advantage of that. Because I think that, we see these lists and we see people tweet like, hey, I'm willing to review your slides and stuff like that. But I feel like not as many people take advantage of that as probably should. Like maybe there's a fear of reaching out to some of the people because they're more well-known or things like that. But I'd love to figure out a way to kind of be more approachable so people take advantage of that more often.
So I know your name's on there, Eric. How many times have people reached out to you?
0.
Any? I've had 3.
I've had people I've already known ask me, but I don't think anybody knew from being on that list.
And I don't know if it's from the wiki page or from just me babbling on Twitter, but I've had 3 people ask me for help with their non-GopherCon related talks. So, not our conference, but other people's. And it's gone really well, and I hope that people continue to do that. But like you said, I don't know how to encourage that anymore.
I take it back. I did have one.
How about you, Russ? How many have you got?
Assuming I haven't missed any email, I have gotten 0.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I feel like people may feel like it's presumptuous. So even when being offered, so like I'd like to find more ways to do that. Whether at a local meetup we host a bring your slides and we'll help day, or like something that encourages more people to do that.
What if we put those people behind some sort of email alias and made it a little more anonymous? Maybe anonymous isn't the right word, but made it a little less certain that you were going to hit Russ Cox when you sent that email. Maybe people would feel less intimidated by sending a request out.
I mean, if the goal is to get people to have emails land in my mailbox, then I guess that might work. But I thought about that, but I thought it was really important that people could select who they wanted to talk to, because you might feel comfortable with someone, or you might have seen someone give a talk and you feel comfortable approaching them, but you don't feel comfortable just emailing an anonymous list and not even knowing who's going to see your request for help. And so I thought it was actually very important that the people asking for help got to choose who they asked for help. And so
that is a good point.
Yeah, I agree with that. That makes sense.
And realistically, we could have both.
This is true. And I think we can probably do a good job probably of, reminding people of the list, and that, we all volunteered our names willingly. Somebody didn't just put us on there. That we,
Yeah, we could add text to that effect. I think that this page is important, right? I created this page because I wanted people to be able to find places to get help. But this is probably like step 5 or something in what we need to fix. I think it's probably more important to encourage conference organizers to make sure that they're casting a wide net, so that it's not just people who are following the conference circuit that know that these conferences are looking for speakers, right? You have to actively advertise to lots of different groups to try to get the word out there that this conference exists and they want you to come speak. And that's got to be step 1, right? And so this is helping with people who have somehow gotten through that part and know that they kind of like to give a talk, and maybe they want to talk it over with someone. But I think that we need to step back and also focus on these sort of bigger, higher impact things as well.
Yeah, but how about if the conference organizers helps promote this resource, for example, this resource is specific, or resources like that? Because, for example, if I never spoke at a conference and I have low self-confidence and, I could majorly benefit from help, but I couldn't get that kind of help, or didn't know that help was out there, I would never submit a CFP. So I can see your conference announcements, and I can see that, okay, you're making it safe for me, but if I can't really submit a good CFP, I wouldn't do it.
Absolutely. We have to do everything.
Yeah, ours says that. The GopherCon says that all speakers will be assigned a mentor of their choice, and mentor will help you from every step along the way up until delivery, something like that. I don't remember the exact words, but if there's a way to word that better, I'd love to change it next year to make it more welcoming and more comforting.
And we can probably link to that speakers page on the CFP page, saying if you'd like help preparing your proposal, these people are willing.
That's a good idea.
Yeah,
and
that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Then I think the next bridge to cross is a lot of people, when you talk to them, won't even look at the CFP page because they just think they don't really have anything of value to offer, so they don't even bother trying. And how do we approach those people and say, like, we all have vast experiences and things like that. There's usually something people can learn from your experience.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I'll do the next Free Software Friday because I got super excited about this one. Last night, the Visual Studio Code team released Linux support for the new Live Share feature, and I got to try it out this morning for about an hour, and it blew my doors off. I was so impressed with how cool it was. I was remotely connected to someone else's Go project, so I had none of this code on my local machine, and yet I could browse through the entire process and look at all of the source code. I could make changes. We could see each other's changes live. There's a little button where you can summon someone to come look at this file I'm editing right now. But the coolest thing is that it's got a built-in like ngrok. So the person running the code on the other end can share the port, the network port that code's running on. And it appears on my machine like it's localhost. So they're running a web server on port 8080 off in California. And I just go to localhost port 8080 and I see the website. It was so amazing. I've got goosebumps right now. It's going to be so awesome for live pairing, for remote team working. I can't wait to use this more. Super cool. So shout out to the Visual Studio Code team who is kicking butt.
That's cool. Russ, I had seen you had posted a project in there.
Yeah, so we talked about Plan 9 a little bit, and the editor that I use came from Plan 9. It's called Acme, and if you Google for me and Acme, you can find a screencast I did a number of years ago. And I just want to give a shout out to Paul Lalonde and Rob Kroger, who have been working on a port of Acme to Go, and it's called Edwood. It's at GitHub, RJ Kroga Edwood, and I don't think it's quite usable yet. I think that they're getting close. But I'm really excited to see how it turns out, and I just wanted to, call that out.
That's awesome. Acme is still one I haven't played with yet. I keep meaning to add it to my list of editors to try, but I just haven't gotten around to it.
Honestly, I'm sure that you're all lapping me with all your fancy editors. So I don't know that I would encourage you to go use Acme, but the main selling point is that it's programmable in much the same way that. Plan 9, everything was a file system, and so you could program through the file system and present things. Acme had that sort of idea too. In fact, under the covers, Acme actually is a file server, but it's running on Unix, so you can't see the files that easily. But it lets you do plugins that talk to the editor, but they're separate processes, and so it doesn't matter what language they're written in. It's not like Emacs where everything's written in eLisp, and so that actually gives you a fair amount of power. So I have written, Acme plugins, essentially different programs that, talk to Acme, and a lot of those are written in Go. I can, do GitHub issues. I can look at code review comments. I can do all that in Acme, and that's all external programs written in Go. And so that for me is, I have, all these comforts that help me be more productive. But, watching other people, as far as actual text editing, right? You guys are light years ahead of me, and that's okay.
I think once you reach a certain point in your career, you're just even for me, people were talking about a bunch of stuff in VS Code for I don't even know how long. And I'm I've been using Vim for 10, 15 years, something like that. It's just, I don't even want to reconfigure Vim, much less learn a new editor, All right. Did anybody have any other projects we want to give a shout out to, or people before we close the show?
I want to give a shout out to the entire Go community. I talked about how I was standing in front of GopherCon and 700 people, and it seemed like a lot. And now it's just completely nuts. We have people doing podcasts and conferences and books and courses and meetups and all this sort of stuff. And Go would not be the success that it is without absolutely everyone who's here. And we want to keep bringing even more people in and make it even more successful. But I'm so thankful to everyone who's here. There's absolutely no way that I could have spent the last 10 years having so much fun working on Go if everyone else hadn't showed up. I would have moved on to something else and Go would have been shut down. And I'm so thrilled that didn't happen. And, thank you to everyone who's, come along for the ride. It's really fun.
Agreed.
It has been fun, yes.
I think part of my love isn't just the language, it's the community. Just too much fun. And the conferences too. I can't even keep up with the number of conferences that keep popping up. I'm actually really sad. I'm going to miss some of them. And then really cool vacation-y areas too, like Iceland and Brazil and.
Yeah, the new one is it Seattle? Go Northwest. I'm really disappointed. It's the day before Golang UK because I accepted a speaking slot at Golang UK, and I wanted to go to the new one in Seattle too. But that only leaves me an overnight flight to London to get there. I don't know if I can pull that off.
You can try.
I could try, but I'm getting too old for that crap.
Oh, I highly recommend you go to the conference in Brazil. It was amazing.
Oh, they're opening their CFP on Monday.
There we go.
Super exciting.
There we go, Eric and Brian too.
Yeah, I need to think of a topic.
And Russ.
Now, when is GopherCon Brazil? What month is that in?
October?
November.
Oh, even better. As long as it's not August.
Feel lucky, Russ.
Oh.
Last time...
I'm sorry, I stand corrected. It's in September. They moved the date.
Oh, yeah. I had remember it had shifted. For some reason, I thought it was October. But yeah, last time we had somebody from the Go team on. We had Brad Fitzpatrick on, and Carlicia got him to do something, close an issue or something.
That's right. She bugged him. I've had this issue open. It was awesome.
I didn't come prepared today. Darn it. Could have milked something out of us.
So I think we are about out of time. But thank you, everybody, for being on the show. Huge thank you, Russ, for coming on and talking to us today. It's been a blast.
It's been lots of fun. Thank you.
We're so excited we finally got you on.
Yeah.
And thank you to all of our listeners. If you're not following us, you can follow us on Twitter at GoTimeFM. If you have suggestions for topics or guests, please file an issue at github.com/GoTimeFM/ping. And with that, goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next week.
All right, that's it for this week's episode of Go Time. I hope you enjoyed it. Do us a favor, go on Overcast, go on Apple Podcasts, go on wherever you're listening to this podcast. Favorite it, share it, like it, tweet it, whatever you got to do. Help us promote this show to your friends and fellow gophers. Bandwidth for Go Time and Changelog is provided by Fastly. Head to fastly.com to learn more. And we move fast here at Changelog and fix things because of Rollbar. Check them out at rollbar.com. And we're hosted on Linode servers. Head to linode.com/changelog. Check them out. Support this show. Our music is produced by Breakmaster Cylinder. And you can find more shows just like this at changelog.com or on Apple Podcasts or on Overcast or wherever you subscribe to podcasts. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. Carlos, you still here?
I'm still here.
How's your parrot?
My parrot?
Yeah, don't you got a bird? Isn't it a parrot?
It's cockatiel.
Cockatiel. There's a difference, right?
Yeah, it's a small, very tiny one.
Oh.
I mean, a cockatoo is a big white one.
Right.
The one I have is small, yellowish.
So I had one of those when I was a kid, and his name was Gooby.
Oh.
Gooby. And he would come up, he would crawl up your arm, up your leg, whatever, and sit on your shoulder, and you could have something in your mouth, and he would take it out of your mouth, you know, that kind of thing. Like, it was a really fun bird.
That's so cute.
And then somebody came to visit, and this bird would walk on the floor like a dog, like a cat, and just walk around the whole house. He didn't fly. I don't know why. He would fly every once in a while to get away, but for the most part, he traveled via feet, and he's a bird. And, well, he got stepped on, and that was the end of Gooby.
Oh.
It was a real
my
bummer.
God. I did not see that coming. Now I want to go to the corner and cry.
It was a twist. I'm sorry about that. Yep.
No trigger warning. What's the matter with you?
Well, I kind of teed it up by saying that he traveled by feet.